So, all right. Well, I think that we can go ahead and get started. I'll just start with an introduction while we wait for everybody to join. So, thank you for those who have joined just now and those who are coming. This is our webinar series, Residency Real Talk with Dr. Samir Desai, and we're very happy to have you guys here with us. Just to introduce myself, my name is Alyssa Harlow, and I am the Director of Marketing here at MD2B Connect. I'm sure I've talked to each of you via email or any other shape and form at one point. Tonight, we're going to be going over the questions that you guys submitted using our Google form, as well as some topics related to the questions that you'd submitted. Please feel free to submit any questions that you have throughout the webinar in the chat. If there is enough time at the end, we'll try to answer as many of those as possible. But if not, we'll try to incorporate some of those questions into our next webinar series. So, as always, I do want to start off by saying that if you guys have any questions or concerns about anything, whether it's about your rotations, about match strategy, about guidance, please feel free to reach out to us. Any member of our team, we're happy to help you. We'd be happy to talk with you individually and answer any questions that you may have. We're here and we want to help you succeed and see you succeed. So please do not hesitate to reach out to any one of us, especially Dr. Desai. So lastly, you'll likely see me sharing different resources and links in the chat. Those are there for you to save if you want to save them, and just some additional information that you guys may be able to use to your advantage. So with that said, we're really looking forward to having you guys tonight, and I'll go ahead and pass it over to you, Dr. Desai.
Thank you, Alyssa. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us here for our May 2024 webinar. This is something that we like to do on a monthly basis, and what we cover in these webinars does depend on what time of the year it is. So there's a lot going on right now, as many of you are getting yourselves ready to apply in September of 2024 for residency. And so in these coming months, we will be discussing such things as the ERAS application, the personal statement. Today, we'll touch upon a little bit about the ERAS application, a little bit about program signaling, geographic preferences, but we'll go into more depth on such topics as we move through the summer. And then as we get into September, we start shifting the content of these webinars towards residency interviews. And so part of each webinar is dedicated to your questions. So in advance of this webinar, we always invite you to submit questions to us so that we can address them. We try to answer as many of them as possible. If we don't get to some, we try to incorporate that into subsequent webinars. And of course, you all have a direct line to me. For those of you who have just started our rotation program this week, you and I haven't talked yet, but we will be talking very soon, and everybody will have a direct line to me. So whenever there is a question, a concern, a doubt, anything at all on your mind, you are always welcome to reach out to me and we can discuss your specific situation. What we believe here at MD2B Connect is that it's not just about doing a clinical experience, it's about us making ourselves available to you to offer mentorship, guidance, and personalized advice. We just came off of the match not too long ago, so we had a chance to visit with many of our rotators from the previous cycle and take a lot of joy in their accomplishments. And what we want desperately for all of you is the same result. When you apply for residency, we want you to succeed. And as Alyssa said, we want to do everything we can to help you get there. And that means doing more than rotations. It means things like this webinar. It means other resources that we can offer you. All of you will be getting or have gotten two very useful books. One is called Success on the Wards, which will help you unlock the full learning value of your rotations and make a great impression while doing so. And the red book called The Successful Match, which is 650 plus pages of detailed information on how to become a strong residency applicant. But beyond those books and this webinar, we have a lot of information on our two websites. So you are all familiar with md2bconnect.com. There is a bit of information that you can access on how to get into residency. We have a great section of our website on IMG-friendly residency programs that Alyssa has done a fantastic job with the rest of our team putting together. And then we have our sister website, which is thesuccessfulmatch.com. That website you may not have yet had a chance to visit. When you visit that website, you will see an extensive blog with many, many articles on the residency match with high yield information that complements what's in the red book called The Successful Match. So I encourage you to visit thesuccessfulmatch.com so you can get familiar with what's on the blog. And you can also access our podcast episodes where we have devoted episodes covering various topics related to the residency selection process. So do visit thesuccessfulmatch.com where you can access that, as well as some Q&As with program directors. So with that, it's time to dive into today's topic. And what that means is I have to share my screen. So give me a second while I share my screen so I can show you my PowerPoint.
And just while we're waiting on that, just to reiterate, if you guys have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to share them with us in the chat, and we can try to get to them at the end if there's enough time, or if there's not enough time at the end of the webinar, we can try to incorporate them in the next one. So just to mention that.
Great, thank you, Alyssa. Alyssa, do you see my screen?
No, I actually see the actual webinar.
You do? Well, hold on just a minute. See if I can see what's going on here. Apologize for the technical difficulty here.
No worries at all. That is that's the world that we're living in, is the world of technology. So, and sometimes it doesn't go as planned. So,
How about now, Alyssa? Do you see it?
yes,
You do
just
see
have
it.
to be in present mode.
Okay, great. So I'm going to change slides here. Do you see the change in the slide?
No, I do not.
Not change it. See the change in the slide. How about now?
No, I do not. If you
Okay.
guys could let us know in the chat if you're also seeing it or not, just so that we know it's not an issue on our end.
Okay, give me 1 second.
While we're waiting for that, obviously we have people from all over joining us, whether you're in your rotation or not. I myself am in Michigan, and Dr. Desai is in Houston. So it looks like you got it, Dr. Desai. So please feel free to share with us in the chat where you're joining us from.
Absolutely. Alyssa, do you see my screen now? Alyssa, do you see my screen?
Yep. Yeah, I can see it.
You can see me switching slides?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, everybody, we are ready to go. Okay, so again, welcome to Residency Real Talk, our May 2024 edition. And I want to start by talking about what we need to be doing. It's May 2024. What are some of the things that are crucial to be getting accomplished? So if you're applying in September, one of the major activities to work on a regular basis is researching programs. That is so very important. Obviously, that is the key to finalizing your program list, the programs to which you're going to apply when you submit your application in September. But the research that you do has so many more advantages beyond that. As you dive into each program, you're going to be able to look at their criteria and match their criteria to your profile. And that is going to allow you to whittle down a very large number of programs into a much smaller list to which you will apply. And that will, of course, save you a lot of money. Now, as you're researching programs, you will see that some programs have individual requirements, and those are very important to pay attention to. For example, a program might have something very particular that they want to see in your personal statement. And if you don't record that and track it and make sure you fulfill that requirement, then that program may not be as interested in you. So it's very important as you're doing your research to record such individual program requirements so that you can meet the needs of those programs. Your research also helps in many other ways. So nowadays, programs do a much better job of staying in touch with applicants via social media. And so when you go to the program websites, you can find what type of social media they are involved in. They may have a Facebook page, they may have an Instagram page, they may be on Twitter, so on and so forth. And you can join their social media, and they will let you know about the exciting and interesting things going on in their program. At times, they will offer you an invitation to attend something that's going on. It might be a conference or didactic, could be a town hall meeting, could be a Q&A with their program director. It could be a panel with residents where they talk to you about what their program is like. And as you attend these types of events, you're going to learn a lot about the program. One of the things that you may be realizing is these programs vary significantly on the quality of information that is present on their individual websites. Some programs are very robust in terms of the information they provide, while other programs are very sparse in the information that they provide, or may even have outdated information on their website. So when you engage with the program in other ways, you can learn the most up-to-date information from the program leadership itself, as well as other people in the know, and that can help you as you make your decisions on where to apply. In addition, the information that you acquire can be used in other ways to show fit with the program. So with personal statements, for example, although many applicants will write a single personal statement, the system does allow you to write program-specific personal statements. And in other words, you can individualize your statement for a particular program. And that is going to be more effective if you have a lot of information from the program, either through the website or through social media or other means that allows you to carefully craft content in your personal statement that shows fit between you and the program. The research that you do will also be used when you send letters of interest, which are typically sent after you apply in September, usually in the month of October. And those letters of interest have been known to help you net interviews. Those letters of interest are more effective if you can communicate strong fit between you and the program. So all this research that you need to do should begin now, because we still have quite a bit of time before we apply. Now, if you're applying for certain specialties, you will know that there are a tremendous amount of programs in those specialties. So trying to tackle a few of these every day will help you get ready for September. Otherwise, what happens is if you don't do this, or you wait and you wait to do it until closer to application submission time, then there are an overwhelming number of programs to get through. So try to knock off a little bit every day, and you will feel great by the time September rolls around. Now, the ERAS application. That is your residency application, and this is the time to start thinking about it, and you can actually start working on it. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. But one of the most challenging parts of the ERAS application are your ERAS experiences. For every experience that you have a description field. Each description field is 1,020 characters, including spaces. That is one of the most important aspects of the residency application, and we don't have to wait until later this summer to work on those, we can start working on them now, because if you work on them now and you get some of it done and you set it aside, you start looking at it with a fresh eye and you start making adjustments and edits to your description so that by the time September rolls around, they're going to be in tip-top shape. We also know that this is the time to ask for letters of recommendation. So if you've completed U.S. clinical experience or you're in the process of completing a U.S. clinical experience, we want to be thinking about how and when to ask for letters of recommendation. Now, in the red book that you have or will be getting, again, that book is called The Successful Match. There's an extensive 40-page chapter on letters of recommendation. It goes into depth on every aspect of these letters, how to ask in a professional way, in a way that helps ensure that the letter that's going to be written for you will actually be strong and commensurate to the level of your performance in that rotation. It also gives you a behind-the-scenes look at what residency programs are looking for in these letters. And so knowing what these programs are looking for allows you to show your preceptors the things that programs would find meaningful if the preceptor was to include it in the letter. So do read that 40-page chapter on letters of recommendation. Now, I'm a big proponent of helping your letter writers write the best possible letter. Now, what does that mean? So obviously, your letter writers are well-intentioned. They want to write the best possible letter. And in order to do that, it really should be a cooperation or collaboration between the two parties. The attending has seen many different things while you are rotating with him or her, but you have also done some things that would be very useful for that particular preceptor to know. So for example, if you've demonstrated that you're a team player, the attending will have seen that in different ways. But something very specific to how you went above and beyond as a teammate may be something that you appreciate on a much deeper and finer level than that attending. But if you're able to share that type of information with your attending, then when your attending writes about how much of a teammate you were, then they can write in that letter that you were valued for being that teammate because you did X, Y, and Z. So this is where collaboration with your letter writer can really help. And we go into that in that red book in the chapter on letters of recommendation. There are some aspects of this residency application process that are, of course, out of our control. For example, we don't have full control over our letters of recommendation, and we don't often have much control over what our medical school has to produce for our residency application. But so with that in mind, I'm referring to your MSPE, your transcript, and any other documents, depending upon what specialty you're applying to. So we need to coordinate with our respective medical schools to make sure those documents are done in a timely fashion. And of course, we don't have control over how fast those things get done. So here we are in early May, we have a lot of time. So this is the time now to reach out to your school to finalize those documents. What else should you be doing in May 2024? We should be networking. This is something that I recommend to every applicant. So as a faculty member at the Baylor College of Medicine, I work very closely with our Baylor medical students, and I talk to them about networking. I do that with DO applicants, and I do that with international medical graduates. In this day and age, it's a must because every program receives so many applications, and it becomes hard for them to decide which 10 to 20% of that total applicant pool should be extended interviews. And so networking serves to help bring a qualified applicant to their attention. And so we want to be recognized as one of these qualified applicants. And so if we have members in our network that have ties to those residency programs, they can bring our name to the forefront, and that will allow the program director and other members of the residency selection committee to take a closer look at our application. And then if we've created a compelling application, we're going to have a much better chance of receiving an interview. And it is true that there are a lot of qualified applicants, and so we don't want to be overlooked. So networking can help us prevent that from happening. Let's go over a few important dates. So these dates are coming up. June 5th is when the season opens. June 26th is when tokens are released. September 4th is the first day that you can begin submitting applications to programs. September 16th is when you can access the NRMP registration. And September 25th at 9 a.m. is the first moment that residency programs can begin reviewing applications. A common question that I get asked is there any advantage, Dr. Desai, to applying earlier in September? Will I get more consideration with residency programs? And the answer is you don't get more consideration if you apply earlier. Now, certainly applying earlier relieves the stress associated with that hanging over your head. But I would tell you that use whatever time is necessary to get that application into tip-top shape. So if you have gotten that into a compelling form on September 4th, then by all means, you can submit your application. But if you need extra time, do feel that you're going to be penalized for needing extra time. So as long as you turn your application in before September 25th, you're going to be in good shape. There is one caveat to that, and that is as you get closer to September 25th, the system does slow down. So in practice, I usually encourage my students to turn it in about a week before September 5th, just to be on the safe side so that you're not running into problems with technology. We talked earlier about how you can start working on your ERAS descriptions. And a great thing to do is to go to the AAMC ERAS website and access the 2025 worksheet. So while we're not currently able to enter our information into the system, we can start working on the residency application because we have access to the worksheet. So the worksheet is available to you. Go ahead and take a look at it. We can start filling in the fields, and that's going to help streamline the process once the system actually opens. You may be wondering, is there anything new with the application? There are some new aspects or components to the application. Some of the more notable ones, you have the opportunity to share with programs your hometowns. Some applicants have more than one hometown. Last year, you could list 5 hometowns. This year, that number has gone down to 3. The other thing that's new, which I'm happy to say is new, it's finally arrived, it relates to honors and awards. Now, they have always given the opportunity for USMDs and DOs to comment on whether they are members of AOA or Alpha Omega Alpha or GHHS, the Gold Humanism Honor Society, or SSP Sigma Sigma Phi, which is only for osteopathic students. So that still remains. That's not really pertinent to the majority of us here. However, they now have created in the honors and awards section the opportunity to not only list other honors and awards as IMGs, but now we can provide key information about those honors and awards. So we can classify them into one of 7 groups. For example, if you got inducted into an honor society in your own country, you can designate the award as such. If you were distinguished for community volunteerism or service, academic excellence, research, you were the recipient of a scholarship or grant, all of that now can be designated through a drop-down box. That wasn't the case last year. And now you have the opportunity to describe the award. You actually have a drop-down box with some characters to describe the award, and that is also a helpful feature because I know that many of you have awards and honors, and we want to make sure that what we've been recognized for, our programs actually can understand. Now, last year, the application went through a change. So previous to last year, applicants could list many, many experiences on their application. Last year, that was limited to 10 experiences. One of the experiences that people could include were hobbies. You didn't have to include hobbies, but a lot of people decided to use one of their 10 experiences for their hobbies. This year, hobbies are still part of the application, but I'm happy to say that they have been removed as an experience type, and they have now their own section on the application, which means we have an extra experience we can use. We don't have to use it for the hobbies. So that's great. Now, experiences on the application can be categorized into different types. They could be work experiences, research, volunteer. They may have to do with education or training, military service, other extracurriculars, professional organization, and finally teaching and mentoring. So one of the things that's a useful exercise right now here in early May is to make a list of all of your experiences. And when you're making a list of your experiences, to be super inclusive, do not exclude anything. Keep everything big, medium, and small on your list to see how many experiences you have. So that's number one thing, is how many experiences do you have? And doing that, you may notice that you have many more than 10, or some people may not quite have 10. And so for those who might not quite have 10, we have 4 or 5 months here to do what I call resume building. And so if we're missing some experiences, we might decide where we're short in. So perhaps research we're strong in, but maybe volunteerism is lacking a bit relative to research. So we might decide that we are going to get involved in a couple of volunteer activities that really excite us. And then that can become, as an example, 1 to 2 more experiences that you could potentially had. Now, those of you who have many more than 10 experiences will have to make some decisions on which experiences to feature. In some cases, some experiences may be left off if they were, in your opinion, insignificant compared to some of the other experiences. In other cases, we may consolidate some experiences into one. So for example, if there are many, many volunteer experiences, we may decide to fold them into one experience so that we can get more of that in there. So this is the time to start looking at that, again, in case you have to do some resume building, but also if you are in a situation where you have many more than 10. If any of you want to talk about your individual situation with me, I'm happy to do that as it relates to which 10 to use. When you list an experience on your application, you are able to link it to what is called a primary focus area. Now, there are many focus areas. These are the entire list of those. So you can see basic science, clinical science, community outreach, so on and so forth. Now, the ERAS instruction guide on the AAMC website will give you definitions for all of these focus areas. So you can see how each of your experience might fit into a different focus area. You also will link your experience to what are called key characteristics. These are attributes and traits that you may have been able to demonstrate through that particular experience. So this is the list of key characteristics that you can choose from. Now, another important aspect of the residency application are your geographic preferences. Now, this is relatively new. It's only been around for a few years. And basically, I want to give you a little bit of background on why this section is so important and why it exists today. So even though it's new, programs have always been interested in your geographic preferences, and they would try to determine where your geographic interests are based on the material that they could see in your residency application. So for example, if you are living in a particular place in the US, they would assume or think that you have an interest in that particular geographic region. Or if you went to college somewhere in the US, or you did your MPH somewhere in the US, or you did something else. So they would look for indicators, or what they considered indicators of your geographic interests by looking at your entire application. And then they would do surveys of residency match applicants. So these are people who actually matched. So they're doing surveys post-match, and they're asking these matched applicants, when you created your rank list, what was the number 1, 2, 3, 4 factors that you used to create that rank list? And they found that year after year, people consistently put geography as number 1 or number 2. So knowing that geography is so important to applicants, they created this geographic preference section to get a better feel for which applicants might be more interested in their program because their program falls in a particular geographic division. It's also meant to help applicants in the sense that it's not always apparent to programs where an applicant's true geographic interests are. So being able to specify that in your application allows them to not overlook you if you have interest in their region. So currently we have 9 geographic divisions, and I would encourage all of you to take a look at those divisions and see which states are in each particular region. And you have the ability right now to identify up to 3 of them as your geographic preferences. And when you identify a geographic region as a preference, you have the opportunity to describe the reason for your preference. Now, if you select one or more geographic divisions, only programs in that region will be able to see that. If you are applying to programs outside of those divisions, they will not be able to see which geographic region you have selected as preference. Some applicants may choose not to specify a geographic interest. They will indicate in the system that I do not have a division preference. And then this will be communicated to all the programs to which they apply. You are also able to skip the question or not respond to it at all. And if you do that, no information will be communicated to programs. Now, can residency programs filter applicants based on geographic division? And the answer is absolutely yes. How do programs use geographic preference information? I think you can learn a lot from some of this data, which is based on surveys of residency programs that the AAMC has done to shed light on what practices programs currently have and help inform us on how to strategize. So how do programs use this information? So they can use it in the screening process. So remember, every program is going to get tremendous number of applications, and they obviously cannot invite everybody to an interview. And there's so many qualified applicants among that large group that they have to do some screening. So the screening process does vary from program to program, but geographic preferences can be used to screen, and in fact is used by many, many programs, 86% based on this review. And then if they are using it in this way, they may do a more thorough application review after they use this to help screen. Now, there are some programs that will send interview invitations to every applicant who selected their geographic region. So one of the benefits to identifying a geographic region is to potentially benefit from that advantage. And it's very hard to know who is going to do that. And from year to year, their actual practice may change. But if that is in place, that is a fantastic thing for us as an applicant. Now, they may also use geographic preference as part of a holistic application review. And we are pushing programs more and more to do a holistic review of applications. And so in this type of review, geographic preferences are just one part of the whole application that is being used to make interview decisions. And 94% have reported that they do that. Now, if we have comparable applicants, so we have people who have similar qualifications, programs can use geographic information as a tiebreaker to decide whom to interview. If one has a geographic interest in their region, that may serve as the tiebreaker to invite that applicant over somebody else who, in their eyes, are equally qualified but did not specify their geographic region. Now, they can also be used for the interview itself. So do not be surprised if in a residency interview, they ask you why you identified their particular geographic region as your area of interest. So you have to be ready to answer that question. Now, you might be interested in how applicants complete this section, right? So we've talked about how programs view this section. Now, what do applicants do? So applicants, most of them, do indicate a geographic preference. Some applicants report no preference. Now, whether you indicate a preference or you report no preference, you still have a description field where you can explain the rationale for your choice. So if you have decided to select the South Atlantic region of the United States, you're going to have an opportunity to describe why that region is of interest to you. If you indicate to the programs that I don't have any geographic preference, you will also have an opportunity to describe why you have no geographic preference. Most people do fill out the box. It's not 100%, but you can see here that the majority of applicants do include a description to explain the rationale for whatever their choice is. Let's now move into program signaling. This is also another important aspect of the residency application. A large percentage of programs use program signals. Now, before we get into this, we need to talk about what this is. So program signaling is something relatively new. Again, it's about as old as the geographic preferences. And this is where, depending upon your specialty, you have a certain number of signals that you can use to let programs that you have the deepest interest in know that you have that interest. And we'll talk a little bit more about how many signals you'll have available to you, but program signaling has actually been shown to be even more important than geographic preferences. And just like geographic preferences, program signaling can be used in different phases of the residency application and review process. So it can be used as a screening tool. It can be used to send interview invitations to every applicant who has signaled the program. It can be used as part of a holistic review. It can be used as a tiebreaker. Looks like I lost the 1 second here. There it is. It can be used as a tiebreaker. And again, you need to realize that before an interview, if you've signaled that program, they are likely to ask you why you signaled that program. Now, this slide is very important because it tells you just how useful and important program signaling is from the program's perspective. So in that survey, 75% of programs agreed that program signals helped me identify applicants whom I would have otherwise overlooked. Now, how many signals do we have? This varies from specialty to specialty. So I'm going to go through the specialties, many of them. In parentheses, you will see how many signals we have for this upcoming application cycle. You will see that some have gold and silver. Gold just means that those are the programs you desire the most. Silver means you desire them, but perhaps not quite to the extent of your gold choices. So you see anesthesiology has gold and silver signals. Child neurology has 3 signals. Dermatology has a total of 28. Radiology has 12, evenly split between gold and silver. Emergency medicine has 5. Now, I also included any change in the number of signals from the previous application cycle. So that 5 is down from 7 last year. Family medicine has 5 signals. General surgery, I was pleased to see that the number of signals for general surgery has gone up quite a bit, 3-fold from 5 last year to 15. Internal medicine has also gone up from 7 last year to a total of 15, again, separated by gold and silver signals. Combined internal medicine psychiatry, you have 2 signals. Neurological surgery, 25 signals. Neurology has increased their signals, going up from 3 last year to 8. Orthopedic surgery and otolaryngology have signals in excess of 25. Pathology and pediatrics with 5 signals apiece. Physical medicine with 8, which is an increase from last year. And then finally, we have preventive medicine with 3 signals, rad-onc with 4, thoracic surgery with 3, and psychiatry that has doubled the signals that you're going to be able to utilize from 5 to 10. So that is a positive development. Now we're going to do your questions. You all submitted a number of questions, a lot of great questions. So we're just going to go through them one at a time, and I'll happy to shed light on it. If any of you need additional information related to these questions as it pertains to your situation, you are always welcome to contact me directly. So questions about year of graduation. So we had several questions about graduation year. One person was concerned about their graduation date of 2015 and whether he or she should be applying only for internal medicine or applying to multiple specialties. So the practice of applying to multiple specialties is commonplace. It's something that US medical students do. Doesn't matter if you're MD or DO, it's something that IMGs do. But it presents some challenges. So one of the biggest challenges is that you cannot personalize your application for that particular specialty. And the ability to personalize the ERAS descriptions for a specialty presents a very powerful advantage that you simply don't have when you apply to multiple programs. In addition, when you apply to multiple programs, you have to rotate in multiple specialties, ideally, because if you don't, the chances of drawing the interest of one of those specialties goes down significantly. That also means you have to get additional letters of recommendation, so on and so forth. So your challenge increases exponentially when you're applying to multiple specialties. Now, some specialties in combination are easier to apply dually than others. For example, internal medicine and family medicine share a lot of overlap. So it can be easier to apply to both. But one thing that I want to caution you is with respect to family medicine, the specialty of family medicine does not appreciate being considered a backup to internal medicine. So they are on the lookout in residency applications for people who are all about internal medicine that just happen to be throwing their hat in the ring of family medicine. So you have to keep that in mind. So that means you have to rotate in family medicine if you want to give family medicine the best chance that you can give. Not doing a rotation and not getting a family medicine physician written letter of recommendation can be significantly detrimental to your chances of securing an interview in family medicine if you're dual applying IM and FM. IM and pediatrics presents more of a challenge because the two specialties are obviously very, very different. We're talking about adults and children. So if you're looking at this, there's some couple of strategies that you may want to consider. There is a specialty called MedPeds, a combination of internal medicine and pediatrics. If you do rotations with that type of doctor, you can sometimes orchestrate clinical experiences where you're seeing adults and children in one practice. And then you can ask that particular doctor to write one letter that's internal medicine specific, if you're applying for internal medicine, and a second letter that is pediatric specific, because you're also applying to pediatrics. So that is one strategy that you can utilize. Another strategy you can utilize is you can look for overlap between the two specialties. There's not as much in these two specialties as they are, as we talked about, in internal medicine, family medicine. But for example, let's say you're dealing with congenital heart disease. And because of the advancements in the diagnosis and treatment of congenital heart disease, more and more of those patients are living longer. Therefore, if you find a pediatric practitioner who specializes, a pediatric cardiologist who specializes in congenital heart disease, quite often they may be working with adult cardiologists. Or as a pediatric cardiologist, they may be continuing to see their pediatric patients even after they get to the age of 18. So in that case, that particular individual, if you rotate with them, could comment on your ability to do adult and children as well. IM and pathology, it presents a steeper challenge because now we're talking about two specialties that are even more different. And pathology is very sensitive to being considered a backup. We said family medicine is very sensitive to that. Pathology have, programs, if you talk to them, they'll tell you that many applicants over the last 10 years have simply applied to pathology thinking that's just easier to get into pathology. So they're on the lookout for people whose heart is not in pathology, whose heart is actually in another specialty, but have just applied to pathology because they thought it would be easier to get into. So those are some of the challenges. Another question about year of graduation: what can I do about the fact that residency directors will be using filters to filter out my application if it's been more than a certain number of years since I graduated from medical school? So yes, this can occur, it does occur. So what you need to do as you're researching programs is make a list of programs that are going to be friendly to your year of graduation. And once you make a list of those programs, you want to heavily concentrate on appealing to those programs. Okay? Now, the other programs that say that they, don't look at people with a certain YOG, that isn't necessarily true. I can tell you many programs that have made exceptions to their rule. So quite often that criteria is not necessarily rigid. One trick to use to figure it out is to take a look at their resident roster. So look at their PGY1, PGY2 roster, and go to LinkedIn or Doximity and look up that particular resident, right? There may be 10 residents there in the PGY1 class. Look at all of them. See which ones are IMGs. You can find that on their resident roster on their website. And you can find when they graduated. So LinkedIn will have that sometimes. Doximity will have that. So if they're making exceptions, that's how you're going to know whether they're making exceptions. So that's going to help you streamline your approach to deciding which programs to apply to. Now, the people who bypass these filters, what do? So there's a couple of things that I can tell you. There's a lot of things, but I'll tell you a couple of things. Number one, networking is essential when you have a YOG that's further back in the past. Because as I said, a lot of programs will make exceptions, but they'll make exceptions when somebody that they know in common to you reaches out to them and says, hey, I know Rohit, and Rohit is wonderful. Gotten a chance to really get to know him through X, Y, and Z. And he's super interested in the program. And I wonder if, you could just take a closer look at him. So that type of recommendation can be very powerful in the sense that it will get your application looked at and it help them remove you from being filtered out. So that's one thing. A second thing that you can do is take stock of what you're known for, right? So all of you have your own unique paths and you're strong in certain areas, right? When I was applying to residency, I was strong in certain areas and not so strong in other areas. So whatever your strengths are may very much appeal to a program, even if your YOG is further back in the past than what their criteria suggests. So if what your strength presents an asset to the program, so let's say you're particularly accomplished in research, or you have tremendous leadership background, these programs may find that very appealing depending upon what they're looking for and what their mission is. And so communicating that to them in various ways can help you bypass the filter. So a lot of different things that you could potentially do, but that's a couple of them. Step score. So we had a question about matching with average step scores. So I thought I'd share with you some of the NRMP data. I just did it for 2 specialties. We'll look at family medicine first. So if you look at family medicine data in the most recent charting outcomes in the match, the mean step 2 score was 225 and 231 for US IMGs and non-US IMGs, respectively. And so below that here in the slide, I've indicated the numbers of people who have matched with scores in that score range. So if you're looking at non-US IMGs, you'll see that 68 out of 121 people with scores between 231 and 240 matched. In internal medicine, the step 2 scores, mean scores for people who matched, were higher. And you'll notice that if we look at non-US IMGs, that there were 819 that matched with scores that would be considered average or within very close to the mean, right? And then a couple of years ago, that was between 241 and 250. And you'll see that 545 people out of 819 matched. So can you match with average step scores? Absolutely. Can you match with below average step scores? Absolutely. And proof of that will come with scrutiny of the charting outcomes in the match document. Another question about step scores. The question is, having a step 2 CK attempt and the prospects of getting interviews and matching into a residency. So this is a very good question. I can tell you story after story of people with attempts who have made it to where you all want to be. So is it possible to get there? Absolutely. Now, what you have to do to get there is you have to strengthen every aspect of your application that you have control over. So that means strengthening your US clinical experience profile, That means collaborating with your attendings to have the strongest possible letters written on your behalf. That means creating a compelling residency application where your ARAS descriptions really shine and stand out over the competition. It means writing a tip-top personal statement that resonates with the interviewer and makes them say, I really need to meet this person. So all of these things need to be done, plus the networking that we talked about before. The networking is crucial for everybody, but it's especially important for people who have attempts. And so if any of you are out there with attempts, we can dive deeper into your personal situation one-on-one. Telerotations. Is it okay to do telerotations if one is not able to travel to other states in the US? So let me say that telerotations were more valued when we were in the throes of the pandemic. Now that we're in a different point, they don't carry that much value because many, many people are able to come to the US and rotate in person. In addition, many of the telerotations that are out there do not approximate what you will do as a resident when you practice telemedicine. So when you're a resident, you will take histories in virtual encounters, you will try to do an examination, although you'll be limited by the virtual encounter. You will have to present your case to your attending, you'll have to document your findings. Telerotations that have that structured into them are the most useful telerotations if you have no choice but to do a telerotation. If you have a choice, it's always better to do something in person. If you cannot travel to another state, I would say before you do a telerotation in another state, try to do an in-person rotation elsewhere in your same state. That would be preferable to doing a telerotation. Another question about telerotations is the value of them instead of on-site. And so as I was saying before with the previous slide, they're not as valued as on-site rotations. But if you don't have a choice, you can't get here to the US, and that is happening to some people, then do a telerotation, but be very selective with the type of telerotation that you do. Ask very important questions like, is there an active patient component? You don't want that telerotation to be purely didactic or role-playing scenarios with the attending. You want it to be active involvement with patients, and you also want to make sure that there are not a lot of learners. We've encountered a lot of telerotations where there are numerous learners, and it's very difficult for the attending to develop any relationship with a particular student. Gaps. What's the impact of a gap between graduation and applying? So gaps in your background, that's been something that's been important to programs for a long, long time. And what are they concerned about if there are gaps? Well, if there's a gap, they're worried that you've been clinically inactive for some period of time, and that period of clinical inactivity may have led to some atrophy of your clinical skills. And so since the number one objective of selecting residents is to find people who are going to be clinically successful, when there's a gap, this is something that they worry about. The second thing that they worry about is what happened during the gap, because any one of a number of things could have occurred that led to the gap. And since they don't know what happened, they wonder if that's going to have a negative effect on residency performance. So these are the things that, among the things that run through programs' minds when you're talking about a gap. Now, in the old days, when I'm talking about old days, I'm talking about 2 years ago when we could list lots and lots of ERAS experiences. It was very easy, much easier, for programs to be able to create a timeline of your activities. Now it's a bit harder because you're limited to 10 experiences. So we cannot always include every experience. So it's a little bit harder to identify gaps. Still, some programs, if they don't identify the gaps before they invite you for an interview, will sometimes go through your timeline at the time of the interview. So you need to have a good plan to address your gap, either in the residency application or certainly before you go for an interview. Another question related to gaps was many residency programs state that IMGs cannot have a gap in practice of more than 5 years to be considered. In this context, does USCE count as time spent practicing? So I have had a lot of rotators through our MD2B Connect program who've had significant gaps, in many cases more than 5 years. and they have been able to match. So having a long gap does not disqualify you from matching into residency, but it gives you less of a margin on all of your application materials. So just as with people who have a step attempt, it means that everything has to be done extremely well. And people with very, very long gaps, depending upon their specific situation, often have to do much more US clinical experience than someone who doesn't have that type of gap. And so that can be a way to reassure programs that, again, you are someone that they're not going to have to be worried about from a clinical sense, that you'll be clinically capable and a successful resident if they bring you into their program. So does USC count? Yes, it does. That's one of the things, and in my opinion, the major thing that you can do to really strengthen your profile when you have a significant gap. Program signals. So we talked about program signals already. This question had to do with how do we use signals for internal medicine. So we talked about gold and silver signals. You have more signals this year than you did last year, which is a positive. The best way to use signal is to do your research on programs and look and see which programs are IMG friendly. Now, the more IMG friendly they are, the better in terms of using your signal. But you have to go beyond that. You have to look at their specific criteria and see how well you match up with respect to your profile. The closer the match, that's going to weigh heavily on whether you want to signal that particular program. You also have to examine your fit. Does your fit with the program exist? Some programs have certain missions or goals, and how well do you fit the mission or goal of that program? Because that fit can be used by programs to decide whom to interview. And finally, the number of signals that any one program gets can have an impact on whether you decide to signal them. Some programs may get hundreds upon hundreds of signals. Well, it may be harder to get an interview from that type of program when there are so many people signaling them. Some programs get very few signals, so you may be in great shape to get an interview from that type of program. Questions about letters of recommendation. So the question is, will letters of recommendation from research PIs and supervising authors be beneficial for both academic and community programs? And the answer is, it depends. So in general, clinical letters carry much more weight than research-based letters. Now, there are some research-intensive programs in every specialty that would value a research letter. So if you're going to include a research letter, I would not include more than one of your 3 or 4 letters that you send to a residency program. But the decision to use a research-based letter is dependent on many other things. For example, what is the nature of your relationship with your PI or supervising author? If, for example, there are layers of people between you and your PI, which occurs in some labs, then your relationship with the PI may not be very tight. And if that's the case, the letter may not be very strong. So you have to consider the nature of the relationship, how well you know this person, how long have you known this person, how productive you've been, the feedback that you've gotten. So in many respects, it's similar to getting a letter from a clinical supervisor. But it can be helpful in certain situations, but it's going to be dependent upon each individual situation. Now, should they be used at both academic and community programs? There are some community programs that have a bit more focus on research. Most of them do not have as much research as you would expect as the academic programs do. And so in sending a research-based letter to a community program, there are some possibilities that some programs might see you as someone who would be a better fit with a program that has a more robust research section of their department. Another question related to research. I want to do research while I'm in the US. Any tips on finding a project? So I have lots of tips. One tip that I would tell you is that there are a lot of people out there with research projects, just looking for somebody who's enterprising, somebody with a strong work ethic, somebody who wants to roll up their sleeves and help them with that project. Now, you all know that I'm a professor at the Baylor College of Medicine, and I work closely with my internal medicine residents, and I mentor them, and many of them want to get into subspecialties. And they know that to get into a subspecialty, it can be helpful to build their resume. And one of the ways they want to build their resumes is in the research arena. Now, the two biggest factors that limit their abilities to accomplish research as a resident are, number one, time. Our internal medicine residents are busy, just like they are at every other program in the United States. And number two, know-how. So even though they're residents, they have varying levels of background and experience in research. So where IMGs can become extremely helpful for one of my residents, for example, is to help them with the time constraints. So once you latch on with somebody and they're too busy, once you have the proper direction, you can move that project forward in a very fast manner. And then your skill set may be very different than what the resident has. And so it's complementary to what the resident has, and the two of you together may be able to make much more headway on a project. So looking at the people who are doing research in the US, whether it's residents, attendings, trying to connect with them, it's often great if you could be introduced to them by other people who have done research with them or are currently doing research with them. But connecting with those types of people can be very, very helpful. More questions about research. How important is it? Is it important? And what do we do if we have no research experience? So again, I'm going to point to some data from Charting Outcomes in the Match. You can access this at the NRMP website. So we're just going to use internal medicine as the example specialty. So in the 2022 Charting Outcomes in the Match document, we have divided the data into US IMGs and non-US IMGs. If you look at US IMGs with no research projects who matched, there were 234 who had no research projects and 160 actually matched. So that's a substantial number of people, a fairly high percentage with no research projects whatsoever. For non-US IMGs, there are almost 200 people out of 400 with no research projects that matched. There are also people in both groups with no abstracts, publications, or presentations that match every single year, and it's not an insignificant number. Now, this is data from a few years ago, but it still holds true today. Now, previously, we knew that research relative to other criteria was not terribly important. Now, that is changing as a result of step one going pass-fail. We have some preliminary data suggesting that research is taking on more importance, but we don't have robust data yet to quantify that or to give us a full picture of how programs have fully modified their selection process with research in mind. But if you're asking, can you match into internal medicine without research? The answer is absolutely yes, because there may be other things that you're stronger in, just like there were things that I was stronger in when I was a residency applicant. So believe it or not, and I know that you'll often hear otherwise, programs are also interested in people who have excelled in community service and volunteerism, in advocacy, in teaching, in mentoring, and the list goes on. So if you have strengths in those areas, that's fantastic. That may help you when you don't have a strong background in research. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't take part in it. So if there's an opportunity to get involved in it, by all means, consider getting involved in it, because that's the only way to try it on and decide whether you want to make research a part of your career. And obviously, if you can get into a quality research experience, it will boost your overall profile for your residency application. Now, what happens if you try, and you just can't land a research experience? Well, what I would say to you is take some courses. There are a number of online courses put on by some of our medical colleges in the US, some of which are free, where you can get training in the principles of research, and you can put that in your application. But so when you interview for residency and they ask you, oh, tell me about your research, you may not be able to point to a particular project, but you can talk about how you've taken steps to build a foundation for future research as a resident in a residency program. We had a question about ERAS experiences. Is there an ideal combination of types of 10 preferred experiences and 3 meaningful experiences that can enhance our application? So let me just say again that we have a limit of experiences we can put in the application. The limit is 10. We are able to identify 3 of the 10 as our most meaningful experiences. So when you create your final list of 10, you have to decide which of the 10 will be your 3 meaningful experiences. If you designate the 3 meaningful experiences, that is what a program will see first on your application when they get to your list of experiences. So you want to be very careful and selective. Now, with these programs varying so much in their missions, their philosophies, their goals, what they're looking for in terms of applicant fit, it's very hard to say what is an ideal combination because it's going to depend on the applicant and it's going to vary from program to program. So anybody who wants to talk about this in more detail as it pertains to your respective situation, I'm happy to do that on a one-on-one call. We had a question about visiting residency programs. Is it okay to try and visit a department you are interested in applying to before the application cycle opens? And if this is something that someone is considering, they're asking, is this frowned upon? So I had a student in the last cycle who wanted to go visit a program. They happened to be working in a lab where their PI had a relationship with the program director. And so they reached out to the program director and they were granted a Zoom interview, just, a get to know interview and an opportunity for the applicant to ask questions of the program director. And during that call, the program director said, I get lots of requests for meeting people. People sometimes want to come and say hi and stop by the office. They want to have a Zoom interview. They send emails, but the volume of those requests is so high that I can't possibly accommodate everyone, even though I would love to do that. In your situation, because I'm a close collaborator with your PI, I made an exception for you. So this gives you a sense of how a lot of program directors would feel about visiting a department. Now, would every program director feel this way? No, not every program director, but I can tell you, having interacted with many program directors at academic conferences across the US, these folks are incredibly busy. So visiting them may actually be viewed as a burden to them, and they may not want to be visited. They may not accept your request to come and visit them. But is it possible that somebody would be open to it? Absolutely, it's possible. I mean, if you're talking about internal medicine, you're talking about more than 600 program directors. But what I would say to you is that this time of the year, starting June, July, August, September, these PDs are swamped with issues related to new residents. So new interns are starting, interns that have been there are becoming PGY2s. So there's a lot going on at that time, and they simply don't have the bandwidth to accommodate visits from lots and lots of applicants. Now, with that being the case, you could still visit the department if you reach out to someone who's not a program director, because those people are going to have very few requests to have a meeting. So you could theoretically approach somebody in a subspecialty or somebody in a different department, and you might be very successful in arranging a meeting, and that can get you closer to the program director because that person likely knows the program director. So that could be something that is more fruitful for you. Again, I'm not going to say that a program director wouldn't be open to it, but most of them would find it cumbersome to have visits. Somebody asked a question about off-track residency programs. These are also known as off-cycle residency programs. So what does that mean? So off-cycle means position is available at a residency program, not at your usual time. So there's an opening. So the opening may occur for a variety of reasons. It could be because somebody dropped out of the program, somebody switched specialties, somebody was terminated, somebody had a visa issue and they thought the person could get there, but now it's August and they're not going to get there. So now there's an opening in August. It can be for any one of a number of reasons. Now, these openings occur regularly. So how can you maximize your chances of getting an off-cycle position? So the first step is being in the know as far as your awareness of the position being available. So there are different ways to know this. You can use online sources like the AAMC Find a Resident, Resident Swap, Unmatched MD, and the list goes on. So you can subscribe to these online resources and be notified when positions become open. I would also say to you to reach out to your network and let everybody you know, whether they're residents, nurses, social workers, attendings, uncles, aunties, let everybody know that you're looking for positions, so that if anybody in your network ever hears of a position, and these positions are often divulged internally before they become publicized, you'll hear about it. And sometimes they don't publicize these openings because there's enough applicants from their internal methods of finding these applicants. So if you have your network working for you, then they'll notify you when that position is available. And having somebody in that network is advantageous to you because a lot of these positions get many, many applications. So if your person in your network reaches out to the program director and says, hey, Dr. Chen, I know Lisa, and she's got so much going for her. Now Dr. Chen is going to take a closer look at your application out of that stack of 150 applications, and you have a greater chance of being considered for that open position. It also means that you need to be able to pivot quickly. So when a position becomes open, that your application materials are ready to go and in tip-top shape so that you can submit it to the program in a timely manner, because quite often these open positions don't last very long. And so if there's a delay between you recognizing when the position's open and you actually being able to submit, that is, of course, to our detriment. So these are some things that you can do to maximize your chances of getting an off-cycle position. Question about matching. How hard is it for US IMGs with 1 publication, 8 presentations, and a leadership position in college to match in surgery with 3 months of USCE? The answer is it's hard for me to give you an answer because there's more data I would need to know about your particular situation to have a more global view of you as an applicant. I have some good information here in your question, but there's still a lot that I don't know. But in this last application cycle, this last match, there were approximately 150 IMGs who matched into categorical general surgery. And it was about evenly split or so between the 2 IMG groups. Now, what I can see from your question is that you have done research and you have quite a few publications and presentations. So I would be very interested to know whether they're surgery specific. If they are surgery specific and you've been working with surgery mentors, then I would say that that's going to be very, very helpful. Even if they're not surgery specific, the fact that you've published and presented shows that you can bring projects to fruition, and that's a plus. The fact that you've had a leadership position is very important to surgery programs. About 70 to 80% of general surgery programs look at leadership when making interview decisions. So that is a helpful feature of your background. As far as your 3 months of USCE, we've had a number of applicants in our program who've done 3 months of USCE in general surgery, who've matched into both preliminary and categorical surgery. But it's not just related to their 3 months of USCE, it's the strong letters that they've been able to earn, assuming that their performance has been strong, as well as a whole bunch of other things that I can talk with you individually if you reach out to me, because then I can consider your other factors in context. And I had a last slide for other questions, but I know we've gone a little bit past our hour. So I think what we'll do with questions is, if you've submitted questions in the chat, we will hold on to those and go over those in the next webinar. And certainly if I have a one-on-one conversation with you scheduled, we can talk about them. Even if it's not scheduled, you know that you can always reach out to me and we can go over your individual situation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alyssa.
Alrighty. So I will go ahead and close this out for the night. Thank you to everybody who joined us. Thank you for everybody who submitted questions on our Google form as well. That really helps us because we really want to answer what you guys are asking. So please feel free to share any topics with us, right now or via email that you really want to hear in the upcoming webinars. We really find it helpful because we want to do our best to help you guys be successful. So with that said, I did also want to briefly mention that we always encourage you and welcome each of you to reach out to us, any member of our team, including Dr. Desai, about any, topics that you want to discuss in private or anything that may be like a little more complicated. we would be more than happy to discuss that with you. We want to see you guys succeed, and we want to be a part of that success. So please feel free, especially if you have any lingering questions after tonight, please feel free to reach out to any one of us to discuss that. So I think with that said, we thank you for joining us tonight, and I'll pass it over to Dr. Samir Desai for some last remarks.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. It's been a pleasure today to be here with all of you. I know we covered a lot of material, and we did so at a pretty quick pace. So again, as Alyssa mentioned, we are always here to talk with you whenever you need to talk. And don't hesitate to reach out. You've heard this from our team members before, but it really is true. You're part of our MD2B Connect family, and as family, we strive to take care of one another. And that means that we would like to do whatever we can to help you get to where you want to be, which is a successful match. So again, thank you for joining us today. And I look forward to talking with all of you very soon, and hope you can join us next month for our Residency Real Talk webinar. Bye, everybody.
Great. Bye, everyone. Have a great night.